Welcome into another episode of the Fergus Spotlight. These are always fun. I got another high school friend, I go way back with Mike. We ski raced together back in high school. So I'm excited. It's we haven't got too much into these conversations, but we have another story of recovery on the show that we're getting into today. So I'm really excited to hear everything. It's always good when somebody is vulnerable enough and willing to come and share some of their experiences, some of the, lows and highs and successes they found in life, and be willing to share that with other people, because that's how we grow. And hopefully people can learn from other people's mistakes and find inspiration through other people's stories. So
definitely. Yeah.
Mike Geisinger, welcome to the show, my man.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So we'll get into, I got a lot of things on my mind to talk to. I definitely want to get into we're not going to bore the people, but I want to certainly touch on a little bit of history of drugs, how we got here, why maybe we're in some of the crises we're in with addiction at the levels of overdose, as we're seeing all of that stuff that's just really, really hard to stomach as a society. As well as, I did a little bit of research on how bad some drugs are. Like, I had ChatGPT rank how bad all the drugs were. So we might get into that a little bit, but we're going to try to have some fun with a conversation, but also just get into a really good topic. But why don't you give people just a quick little overview of maybe what we're going to be getting into pertaining to how you're involved with meetings and some of that stuff. So I got very involved with doing the service work part of it. By the way, sorry to interrupt. This is congratulations. This is 15 months of sobriety today, as well as you're going to graduate from drug court right after this interview.
Yep,
so it's a big day. It's a big day. So just to kind of preface that a little bit more for you.
Yeah. So I really dug into the service work this time of it. Everything kind of changed when I became a sponsor and started taking care of other people. And I was very involved with meetings in recovery. I eventually started getting positions on the board for various meetings and really started giving back to the best of my ability. I work very closely with the treatment center, the low-intensity residential treatment center in Perm, Minnesota, which is called Rewind. I'm very close contact with the counselor there. I talked with them. I've actually spoke there this month. And then I'm also very involved with Perm 180, which is also a place that I had graduated from, which is a sober living apartment. That there's less like structure. There's really no like program per se, but there's a lot of support and a lot of help. And I got so much out of 180. It was really incredible. And now I'm living at my own apartment. I have a job, sponsoring multiple people. It's been a really incredible journey, an unexpected journey. I didn't think this is where I would be, and this would be my passion to give back and help other people. It's really incredible. Well,
I had to hold off. We just had lunch, and I had to hold off of because we haven't really connected. I reconnected with you. I had Joe Norman on the show, and he shared his story of, his sobriety journey, and now he's working with Teen Challenge. Awesome. Super cool to hear these full circle stories. But I had gone to his drug court graduation and ran into you there. Yeah. And that was kind of the fate of us reconnecting. And then you reached out and said, hey, I'd be willing to, come on and talk if you ever needed a guest. And so here we are. But, so it's really, really cool. I had to hold off, though, on our lunch break today. I had to hold off on asking you about what's been going on, what happened, what's your story, because I wanted to uncover that here because, like I said, we skied together in high school, and I don't know what you did with yourself. I don't know. Obviously, you put yourself in some situations that you needed to recover from.
Yeah,
but
you could say that.
Yeah, but we're going to get into that story. We're going to uncover it. Before we do, I got to thank the sponsors. We've got Atlas Outdoor Services, big supporters of the show, Outstate Brewing, Stumbino's Coffee, Victor Lundeen's, Fergus Home and Hardware, Liberty Business Systems, and Wayne Schuett with Century 21, all just big supporters, and I couldn't do it without you guys, so thank you very much. So, all right, where does it begin for Mike Geisinger? Geisinger.
Yeah.
So, grew up in Fergus Falls?
Born in Santa Cruz, California,
Okay.
but quickly moved to Fergus Falls, where I basically lived my entire life. Got introduced to marijuana first when I was about 13, and I instantly kind of fell in love. I always felt that there was something a little off with me. Like, I was popular and I had friends, but I wasn't good at school. I didn't get good grades. And this made me feel very detached. I didn't understand, like, why am I not like everyone else? Like, why do I struggle? I had to be in some learning classes for my reading and writing skills. And a lot of this had to do with, of course, my priorities were off, which I just wanted to hang out and have fun. I didn't want to do what I was supposed to do, responsible, which I almost think is a precursor identifier for me later becoming a drug addict. The symptoms were there. I had a very addictive personality when it was football season. I was all about watching football, playing football video games. Basketball season, all about playing basketball video games. I dove into things so intensely, and then I had this feeling that, like, something was wrong. It's like the cauldron was mixed perfectly to produce an addict. It was bizarre. I haven't really thought about that till now, just talking with you. But so I got introduced to marijuana at 13. Quickly went through my savings. My parents ended up putting me in a inpatient treatment center for that. Got out and was doing a little better. Wasn't really smoking. This was around the time that I was on the ski team with you. And I slowly started to meet other people in high school that smoked weed, so it came back into my life. With that, the influx of benzodiazepines like Klonopin, Xanax, anti-anxiety meds, painkillers, opiates like Percocet and Vicodin, morphine, little bits of cocaine, psilocybin.
We're working our way up the list, by the way. The Chat GPT ranked list of intensity of drugs here. That's how it goes, right? That is the story of the slippery slope, and it's why
it's a progressive.
It's why a lot of people, who, it's a slippery slope. It's why cannabis is that gateway. Alcohol often is a gateway. Those are the two most probably common gateways for people to start down a life of.
I think that it's good now that cannabis has become legal, because it takes away that gateway factor, because of cannabis, I was exposed to other drugs because I had to get cannabis on the streets illegally. Now we've taken that factor out, so people that want to utilize it can utilize it appropriately.
Right. Yeah. So, but finish. So you basically started down a slippery slope in high school. You were introduced to a lot of these like harder drugs in high school.
Yeah. And then, so my parents put me into treatment again. I got out of treatment. So by the time I was 16, I had already been in 2 outpatient treatment centers. So I started pretty early, got out, started drinking, which led to me smoking weed again, and then more drugs. Eventually the opiates got really heavy, and I started intravenous or IV shooting up when I was just 19 years old. Then that transitioned to trying meth for the first time, started shooting up meth when I was about 20, 21, and the needle really locked me into an addictive stage. And a lot of drugs surrounding that. When I say opiates, I mean I've done heroin, fentanyl, all sorts of things, different type of hallucinogenics, and just really progressed. Started losing a lot of my friends and because of the shooting up, and got an overwhelming sense of loneliness, despair, and depression, which made me dive into my addiction even deeper. Ended up getting some felony charges because of me attempting to get money for drugs, a burglary. Eventually, the bad one, first degree arson charge, which sent me to Lino Lakes prison for 58 months. So I sat some time in prison.
Did you serve the full 58 months?
Well, you only sit 2/3 of it, and the other third you're on parole. So I was in county jail for about 12, 13 months waiting. Then I was in prison for about 26, and then I was on parole for about 18.
Wow.
And fortunately, I was in a medium intensity, so it wasn't as bad as it could have been. I was able to get my GED because I had dropped out of school as a result of my drug use prior. I was able to get my GED. I got certified as a CNS, a cable networking specialist, like copper installing cables for Wi-Fi and stuff like that. Got in really good shape and kind of got my life together. But then when I got out, I got a job and I was sober and like I'd go to work.
How old were you when you spent that stint in jail?
I had my golden birthday in there. That would have been 28 because my birthday is March 28th. So I was in there from like age 26 to 29.
Okay. And then you got out and slipped back into some nonsense.
Yeah. I was white knuckling it, they would call it. I was sober and I would go to work, go to the gym, go back home, watch football. But I wasn't going to meetings. I had no healthy support. I didn't indulge myself into a environment that was conducive to maintain sobriety. So I didn't have any support networks. I didn't have anything to help me. I didn't have any service work that I could do to give myself a sense of whole. I pretty much was just existing, and eventually that led to relapse on methamphetamines, and I went back down into a dark spiral of using for many years until finally, with my using, I got a really bad case of psychosis, meth-induced psychosis, where you think you hear things that aren't real. I thought I was actually hearing stuff through the radio of like people first being nice, like getting me to like sing along with them, and then it got dark, and I won't go. The details are not really important, but the important part is it ended up leading to a suicide attempt where I tried to hang myself, but rewrited myself, and then tried to end my life. And I took scissors to my arm. Oh. I don't know if the camera can see it, and actually was able to cut through my artery. And watching I don't want to get too graphic.
Well,
but watching the blood and waiting and feeling like at peace, like I was ready to go. I went through such torment and such a hard time with the things I was hearing that I was just ready for it to be over. And eventually I got impatient and decided not to do it. Ended up going to the hospital. They had to medevac me to Fargo.
You brought yourself to the hospital after you cut your arm?
No, my mom ended up driving me, which was horrible because I traumatized my mom in that event too. And they medevaced me to the hospital, and I come to with a tube in my mouth. And of course, I'm already pumped full of fentanyl and oxy. So instantly, it's like, oh, I already have opiates in my system. So that led me to getting mildly re-addicted to opiates again. And of course, when I was out of the hospital, you'd think an event like that would get you to stop, but it didn't get me to stop. I kept using. And eventually I self-sabotaged my way into jail because I got to the point where I knew I couldn't do it by myself, but I was too afraid to go to treatment on my own. So I basically knew that if I drank and if I used, in 2 days I would get UA'd, go to jail, go to treatment. And I thought about it and I go, I'm completely okay with that. Like, I surrender. I'm going to jail in 2 days, and I know that for a fact, and that I'm okay with that. So I did. Ended up going back to treatment, to rewind, graduating, to Perm 180, graduating, getting involved with service, sponsoring other people, and that kind of brought me to where I am now.
So you go back? How long did you go back to jail for then? After?
Just like 10 days.
Just like 10 days. And then you went straight out of that into this program, into these programs.
I actually went to North Star first, but they had to, like 2 weeks in, they come up to me like, Mike, we got to kick you out. And I'm like, why? What did I do? And they're like, we didn't know about the arson charge. Like, that slipped by. Like, we can't have. So I had to get kicked out, and they were going to send me to another treatment center, but my PO at the time,
what was the arson charge? You tried to burn something down?
Basically, okay, if people don't know the deadly combination of mixing a benzodiazepine like Klonopin, Xanax, Valium, and alcohol, it basically almost instantly blacks you out. Now, I had a high tolerance at that point for benzos, so I took like 3 milligrams of Xanax, which is pretty high dose. The most they prescribed for like a single dosage would be 1 milligram. So I took 3 milligrams in one sitting, but I forgot and went out and started drinking, and the lights turned off. I blacked out, broke into my neighbor's house, started it on fire, and then woke up the next morning in the jail with like cockaburs in my hair because I guess I was in the woods. Like my mugshot is pretty, I think it's funny, but it's also horrible because it's a pretty, I look really, really bad. But
Did you burn the house down?
no, there was no structural damage. There was nobody inside the house. I'm very thankful for that. Yeah, there was a lot of smoke damage, a lot of property damage, some sentimental items of the family. And it's like I didn't have anything bad against they were really nice, good people. Like they were a nice family, had kids, animals and stuff and so it was just like a drunken benzodiazepine fueled rage blackout that
Yep.
yeah.
But that stuff stays on your record for a while. And even the treatment centers are like, yeah, we can't have you here.
yeah, it's a hard one. Like
It's a hard one.
Getting a job, getting an apartment,
yeah.
like people don't like fire. And I understand why. I'm considered an insurance risk with that type of charge. So
Interesting.
but I've been fortunate to be able to get everything in my life now, regardless of that.
So obviously we'll transition the story a little bit more here kind of into your recovery and how you're helping people a little bit.
Yeah.
But before I kind of want to talk about this, like, I don't know if there is any conflict of interest with, obviously when the Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, there's the anonymous factor to it.
Yeah.
So obviously the fact that we're broadcasting this over KBRF radio and Spotify and all these other places, you have certain things that you probably can or should or shouldn't talk about when it comes to what you do and what goes on in your guys' meetings and stuff.
Yeah. I can't really disclose much about the inner workings of the meetings. I am a proud member of NA as well as a group called PIP, and I want to say
PIP.
But
Okay.
before I say anything, I want to say that I am not at all a representative of these organizations or group. I am here simply representing myself, telling my story of how these organizations benefited me. So I'm here as myself, and I'm not representing anything. That's part of the anonymity that's very important with the service structures put in place for these organizations.
Right. Do you know where they came to be? Do you know the history of NA, the history of PIP?
A little bit. Honestly, I'm not the best person to get into that. If you want to know some of the history, there is the basic text big book for Alcoholics Anonymous, which was transferred to the literature that is used in NA as well. And that's available for anybody, as well as with PIP, which is PIP Success, which stands for Progress is Perfection or Perfection is Progress. Basically stating that if you're making progress, like you are perfect. And that literature is also available online. If you go to www.pipsuccess.org, there is a website that you can get more information on about that. So that cool. it is available out there to the public.
I appreciate that. So talk a little bit more about like your kind of like the process of getting clean, because it sounds like it happened for you once and then you ended up in the hospital and then that led you down another path again. And talk about like that, the physical process of maybe getting sick or whatever. I mean, you were getting off of, it sounds like methamphetamine.
Methamphetamines and alcohol was the main one. Opiates was my primary drug of choice back in the past, but towards the end it was primarily meth and alcohol, yes.
And the process of the physical process of getting sober off that?
Well, physically, I'll first say you're really weak. There were times when I was heaviest in my addiction that I would be like the morning after being up for multiple days using methamphetamine constantly, and I would be like mildly out of breath and having a hard time standing just walking from the living room to the kitchen to like fill a glass of water. That's how like rickety I was. Like my body had no nutrition. It had no macronutrients to perform basic operations within my body. So like my body wasn't functioning at an optimal level. And the food I was taking in was mainly carbs, fat, maybe some protein, but I wasn't getting that diverse micronutrients. I wasn't supplementing with a multivitamin. I wasn't getting a bunch of fruits and vegetables. So like my body was operating without its basic command systems working at maximum efficiency, basically. So I felt like an alien. Like I felt normal.
And you're like a gym addict now.
Yeah, I'm huge. Yeah, I'm
so
huge
obviously
into I'm huge into health
you
too,
mentioned like health, the physical aspect of that, getting active, getting in the gym happened before, or like, right? Like that was like kind of the first step of you getting your life back.
Yeah. I've always had a hard time with the higher power concept and spirituality. So like as soon as I got to rewind, and I weighed maybe like 205 pounds, somewhere in that area, my mindset was like, I'm going to lose a bunch of shape and I'm going to get in great shape. And I knew that undeniably 100% because for one, I did it before. I was overweight. Before I went to prison, got to prison at like 90 pounds. I dropped down to 158, started packing on muscle. I basically did the exact same thing and I knew I could do it. So I'm not going to say that losing weight and getting in shape is easy, but if you have the right mindset and you create a environmental that's conducive for you to achieve the goals you want, like proper nutrients. I had a membership to a gym I could go to, so I would play pickleball for 6 days a week. Before I got a job, I would play pickleball for 3 hours, and then I'd lift weights for 3 hours, 6 days a week. So 30 hours a week at the gym. And it was fun for me too. So that's another thing. Like you have to find a way to burn calories that is fun. Like if you hate going to the gym, you're probably not going to sustain it. I liked playing pickleball. I liked lifting weights. I liked running on the treadmill.
Right.
So it was easy for me. And I also had that mindset, that confidence, like that 100% belief in I'm going to do it. And so I did it. And it was kind of the first foundation. And looking back, spirituality was definitely helping me do that, but I didn't know it because I found the spirituality later. And then realized like, okay, this spirituality, this consciousness within the entire universe, this love that I feel has been with me the whole time. I just couldn't identify it because I wasn't open yet.
So your process was very much so the physical exertion, physical recovery, and then you had kind of some spiritual breakthroughs as a result of you getting involved and sponsoring and helping other people, because that's what connects you to I'll call it like the human intelligence grid, right? Like
the universal consciousness.
You get hooked up to this. I mean, I believe in God. I'll call it what it is for me, you know. But I believe that he does, or I don't want to say he because that's always a weird.
But you can.
Yeah, like I think that, but that's not actually what I like.
Oh, okay,
that's not actually what I think. Like I often say that I'm like, oh, he, but it's actually not. It's like God is bigger than that. God is bigger than that. You know. But anyways, like my concept of that, like it becomes very clear the spiritual grid that we're all connected in and we're all synced up in when you help other people.
Yes.
You know, when you do that act of service, something activates within you. There's also the psychology behind that is like when you are in an act of service, you're like, it's the same part of your brain that's supposed to exist with like depression and grief, or like there's the negative, like depression or anxiety. The same part of your brain is activated when you're in service, and like the two cannot coexist. That's supposedly neuroscience. I don't know too much about it, but I heard that from like Andrew Huberman.
I dig into a lot of that. Yeah.
So there absolutely is something to the service, but that's what did it for you was getting. So what did that look like? Were you, how long were you clean for before you became a sponsor? Did you get a sponsor first?
Yes. So I got a sponsor right away.
Before you got clean out of like a
No. So I wasn't gonna do like a 12-step program. My thoughts was I was maybe gonna try something like smart recovery. But then I was in treatment and I looked up what Rewind was, and it was a 12-step program. And this was my first thing of like letting go and me not trying to control the narrative and letting the universe provide. Because I seen it, I go, well, looks like I'm doing the steps. I had no reserve about doing it. I just, well, it's planned for me. So I got to Rewind, which is a 12-step program. I started working the steps.
Was that court ordered? Going to those programs?
It was part of drug court, yes.
Okay.
Court ordered, yeah.
Yep.
Because I actually got into drug court not to get out of any charges, but I did it to get more accountability. And then, of course, once I was sober a little bit, I tried to back out of it because that's what we do. We're addicts. We're like, oh, crap, I have more accountability. I don't want to do this. But now I'm so grateful and thankful for what drug court has done with me. The extra accountability was incredible. I made it through the full program, didn't have a single violation, enjoyed it, enjoyed interacting with all the people. I can't say more good things about the Otter Tail County drug court system. It's been incredible for me. But so where was I?
We were just talking about that process of you becoming a sponsor, getting your first sponsor, or however that works.
So I got a sponsor pretty much immediately, and about 6 months in, when I was about 6 months sober, the idea of me being a sponsor came in. We started talking about it. I was like, okay. And I wanted a selfish program. I wanted to get in, get sober, get out. I didn't want to help other people. Like I wanted to do me, get clean, get me healthy. And that is like such a selfish thing to do in retrospect of what I actually had came to do. So then I remember the exact morning my sponsor texted me. I'm probably about 8.5 months sober. And he goes, Mike, I want you to start sponsoring other people. And that same day, I got a sponsee. So I became a sponsor that day. I knew someone who that could potentially work with me. And all of a sudden, everything changed. I had my first unexpected spiritual awakening. So when I've gone through treatment, I've always had what I called the void. There was always something missing deep inside me, a yearning, a desire for more, a sense of fulfillment, a purpose. And the moment I became a sponsor and was helping someone else, a light bulb clicked off. I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is the piece, helping other people. And I didn't think that was going to happen. I didn't know, but it makes sense when I go back to thinking when I was a little kid, like watching the movies, like I feel like every little boy, or at least me, wanted to be like a superhero, wanted to be a hero, wanted to save the world, wanted to protect. And all of a sudden, my life positioned me into that position where I could now help other addicts recovery. And like, I had a purpose now, a reason, and a non-selfish one, a selfless one that was constructed out of love. Like, how beautiful was that? And how right was it too? It didn't feel like I was forcing this. It felt like it was meant to me. So that was the big transformation, was me becoming a sponsor around 8.5 months sober. I've sponsored a few people since then. The statistics aren't great for the people. Like, I'm an anomaly and I still don't have a lot of sober time. Like, in retrospect, 15 months is not a lot of time yet. Like, it's great. And it's great, of course, but I got to stay humble, and like, life's a lot longer than 15 months. So I do not have a lot of time yet. But the fact that I'm in this position, I'm operating on boards, helping other people, I couldn't be more grateful. And I just know right now that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about this. Like, I've always believed, like, in this very moment, you're exactly where you need to be. You know, like, I've always believed in the fate of the conversations that I have on this show, and the facilitation of a higher power connecting all of these conversations to the people that need to hear them and the people that need to be a part of them. So, should we talk about the history of drugs a little bit or what?
We can dive into that. I don't know how much help I can be, but I can tell you my experience with drugs. Maybe I could rate them against ChatGPT and see who has a better list.
So, brief history of drugs here, it looks like.
Okay.
You see opium poppies. The first evidence of the opium poppies being cultivated in Mesopotamia, modern Iraq, used for pain relief and religious rituals. That was around 3000 BC.
Okay.
There's obviously reports of cannabis being used throughout ancient China as medicine and spiritual use. It looks like coca leaves were chewed by indigenous South Americans for energy, the precursor to cocaine. You had the use of psychedelics reported, psychoactive mushrooms reported, as early as 1000 BC or earlier in Central America, spiritual ceremonies. Obviously, it looks like the synthesizing of it. I'm trying to figure out here on my notes here, but
Okay.
you had opium. The opium is kind of the root of obviously now we have all these synthetic opioids and stuff, like all the things that have come from it. But it looks like morphine was isolated from opium by a German scientist in 1803. That was sort of like the first isolation of modern whatever morphine. And then it would have been that would have been the same around the same time, 1839 to 1860. Though that period of time was like the Opium Wars in China, where Britain forced China to accept opium imports, fueling mass addiction. So that was the rise of opium addictions. You hear about the opium addicted Chinamen back in the day, So that was that period of time. And then it looks like in 1859, cocaine was first extracted from coca leaves. In 1874, so this looks like, you had morphine isolated in 1803, and then in 1874, heroin was synthesized from morphine.
Yep. A lot of it started from morphine. I know.
So everything kind of came from opium to morphine to heroin, and I don't know where
like oxys and stuff.
Well, that's a little further down the list. It looks like OxyContin was released in the 90s by Purdue Pharma, and it was marked as a low risk opioid, but fentanyl,
definitely not low risk.
It was marked in the 90s. It was, but fentanyl. I mean, that's obviously a little more recent. What is fentanyl? Is that just is that like a synthesized opioid as well?
Yeah, fentanyl is a synthesized. I don't know how different it is on a molecular scale from regular opiates, because on drug tests I've seen they have a testing strip for both fentanyl and opiates, so they must have a different chemical composition. I'm assuming it doesn't bracket into the same thing, and they're synthesizing more dangerous and different versions of it as it goes. But yeah, the potency and the strength compared to others. So you have your fentanyl, and then they transfer to carfentanil, which is I don't want to say a number because I know it wouldn't be accurate. It'd be me guessing, but it's much stronger than regular fentanyl. And then beyond carfentanil, I think they've even came up with different ones, and they do different ones.
So
just adding, and
just like someone who's more naive about I don't know how I've been around a lot of people that have smoked weed. I've seen people do other drugs, but what's the consumption mechanism for fentanyl? How do people consume it? Do they smoke it? Is it injected? Is it mixed? Is it something laced with it?
It's
what is the consumption method there? Because
it comes in different forms, but so in hospitals, because they do use fentanyl in hospitals for surgeries and stuff. It's usually a IV version, an injectable version, usually delivered through an IV, mainly reserved for surgery or coming directly out of surgery. It's not a maintenance opiate they give you. It's a strong one for you come right out, and they give you some of that. I had a friend who had stage 4 bone cancer, and he wore a patch. So transdermal, which is a patch that transmits through the skin. So that'd be another form. But it's water soluble. So you could basically eat it, snort it, shoot it. I mean, that's not the regular method, but it can be processed through your body and break through the blood-brain barrier pretty much in any
Okay. And
needs.
the reason I'm asking that is because obviously you're hearing about a bunch of people that like are dying of this that don't have like, some of them don't have any history with drugs at all. And it's like they're getting into either maybe they smoked some marijuana that was laced with something and it kills them. You know, like there's stories of like crazy stuff happening. So I'm curious as to like how that is happening, like in a way where people are maybe getting like, they don't even know they're doing this drug.
There's basically no pure drug anymore in my mind, because one time when I was using meth and went to jail and they gave me a UA, I also failed for MDMA ecstasy. My meth was cut with ecstasy. It's the same with marijuana, or you think you're getting these Percocet tabs, but it's actually compressed fentanyl and can kill you instantly because the potency and strength is so much higher than what a regular Percocet would be. So basically, and even with the compressed pill forms of fentanyl, you don't know if you're getting one that's weaker in potency or one that's going to get you in one hit and you're overdosed. And they're now mixing it with I think it's called the xylazine, which is a tranquilizer, and Narcan blocks the opiate receptors, so the opiate cannot act on the brain. Well, if it's mixed with xylazine, there's no Narcan for that. And it operates in the same systems, I believe, where it gets you, your respiratory rate gets extremely low or you stop breathing. So if you have a combined mixture of fentanyl and xylazine, which a lot of these can be mixed with, and you stop breathing, Narcan ain't going to help you. So,
and that's the scary reality of it is an estimated 100,000 people a year in the United States over the last 5 years have those are the numbers. Estimated 100,000 people.
Yeah.
100,000 people. That's huge. That is massive. That is an unbelievable amount of people that are overdosing on drugs. Most of them in the last 5 years are due to fentanyl and some other things. But kind of just keeping going with the history there, like I mentioned, from the late 1800s when heroin and cocaine was synthesized. Then you had 1898 Bayer Pharmaceuticals introduced heroin as a non-addictive painkiller. Earliest 20th century, we had the first drug laws and prohibitions in the 1930s. The 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act requires labeling of medicines with addictive substances. The Harrison Narcotics Act came in 1914. You had alcohol prohibition as well, kind of there in like the 20s and 30s. Finally, 24 years later here, or like not more, over 25 years later here, heroin was finally banned in the U.S. due to rising addiction. So we definitely have a history here. Coca-Cola put cocaine in Coke in the early 1900s. There's definitely a history of it all. And I think when you hear names like Bayer Pharmaceuticals tied to this stuff and seeing where these companies are still at today, it's like, it's kind of sickening. Big Pharma, the role that Big Pharma has played in all of this throughout the years.
Isn't it weird how it's not until something hurts us enough that we take action? The fact that it can hurt us in the first place doesn't matter if it's profitable.
This is a really good point too. This is and this is why just kind of going back to, we'll get into like our tiers of drugs here and why it takes a certain level of bad to activate you to change. And so trauma. It's almost like if you're in sometimes a situation that is much worse can actually be better. And this is Alex Hormozy or whatever. I don't want to say it's like an original thought, but if you're in a situation, for instance, like if you have a job that doesn't suck so bad, or like, let's use drugs for instance, like clearly I have a problem, like I'm doing meth, or like this is ruining my life, I have a problem. Activate change. I need to change. This is like activating change in me. But what if you're just a guy that wakes up every morning, smokes weed, and just like smokes, whatever. I don't want to use like that as like, but yeah, let's say like the lower form of addiction, like nicotine or whatever, like something that's more socially accepted.
That's it.
Is a better way to put it. Something that's more socially accepted. So when you have a addiction or a habit that is not as destructive or detrimental or more socially accepted, like alcohol or whatever, like it doesn't it's less likely to activate that need for change in you.
Yeah.
And so that's why a lot of people struggle with like being like partially an addict or like not realizing how destructive this pattern is in their life, drinking or smoking so much weed or whatever. So sometimes a situation that's much worse can actually be better because it triggers change.
Because it hasn't triggered a high enough emotional response of negative emotion to, that makes sense completely,
So, but anyways, it looks like, you know, you obviously had in a lot of, throughout the 90s, you had a lot of stuff going down with drugs. You had the rise of, in the mid 1900s, 1950s, you had the MK Ultra mind control experiments with LSD and the CIA. Amphetamines were being prescribed for weight loss and depression in the 40s. You had the Controlled Substance Act of the 70s really was what established all the drug schedules. Richard Nixon declares the war on drugs in 71, and then in 73 the DEA was founded. So, and then since then you can go into the crack epidemic and the redlining of districts and all of the stuff that goes on with that, the laws that were changed to make crack more severe than cocaine penalties, and that's a deeper conversation that I won't get into, but so yeah, basically it brings us to where we are today, where as early as the 90s you're seeing and fentanyl that really rose. It says like 2013 fentanyl began flooding US drug markets. And then in 2017 the US has declared an opioid crisis as a national emergency. With those numbers again reaching over 100,000 annual overdose deaths in the United States annually. So, yeah, crazy times we find ourselves in here, but it just keeps getting worse. I mean, according to ChatGPT here, this fentanyl's a bad one. That's the worst one. They say it's the worst one because of the potency of it.
I wouldn't disagree.
And because of the risk of overdose on your first use. So that's what they say. Synthetic opioids and fentanyl, the deadliest drug today, highly addictive, requires only micrograms to cause fatal overdoses. It's just too concentrated. Is that the best way to explain it? It's so concentrated.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because micrograms, you're starting to get down to thousands of a milligram.
And then this is kind of how they say this. I don't know if the tiers are worth anything. It says tier 1 would be like fentanyl, synthetic opioids, heroin, methamphetamine, crack cocaine, crocodile. That's this like
it like literally eats your skin.
Desomorphine is what is the medical term for it, or
I don't know a whole lot. It's like a mixture of like gas. There's like gas.
The zombie drug. That's is that the drug that's got people looking like zombies in like the streets? Is that probably what it is?
That might have been maybe.
And then it says the next tier, considered highly addictive and harmful over time, still cocaine, alcohol, nicotine, benzodiazepines, and barbiturates.
Yep.
And then the next tier, moderately harmful but not instantly life-threatening, is what ChatGPT says. Moderately harmful but not instantly life-threatening: ketamine, MDMA, LSD or acid, psilocybin mushrooms.
A lot of those have had therapeutic values proven in tests.
I mean, that's another thing we're seeing now. You saw the Aaron Rodgers dark room experiment where he went off to South America for his ayahuasca journey or whatever.
DMT.
There is once you get into, it's very, very interesting how you get down into the list, and then some of the drugs lower down the list have helped people get away from.
But they're still on the list.
Right? And obviously, like when it comes to like LSD and mushrooms and stuff, I think that although you're not gonna I wouldn't say it's not addictive. There's no like addictive properties, but definitely people who are predisposed to mental illness or psychotic breaks of one way or another, like marijuana can be a trigger for that for a lot of people. Linked to schizophrenia and lots of things. So whereas these drugs that are I don't want to say harmless, but can be super harmless for some people.
Because they have experience.
Certainly can cause, I mean, if you're looking at, if you cannot look at LSD and say, I'm going to have an 8 to 12 hour experience where my mind is completely altered and there's no chance of me going insane. Like lots of people go insane from that sort of stuff, you know? Yeah. So, but then in a tier of its own at the bottom here, it says marijuana, tier 4, low risk, but still not harmless, low addiction potential, which I tend to disagree with. I think that there's higher addiction potential for marijuana than some other things, but can impair memory, motivation, and mental health with heavy use. Certainly mental health, it's hard to probably pinpoint where people's mental health really problems come from, but certainly people who abuse drugs, whether it be marijuana or more extreme drugs, tend to suffer more with mental health. So.
Yeah, I'd be curious to what all sources ChatGPT took into factor to create that list, because for the purpose of like recovery, to me that list would be dangerous because it diminishes people who have problems with lists that are lower, with drugs that are lower on the list, because then other people will be, but I'm dealing with fentanyl, like it's at the top, it's worst, and that takes away the importance of helping someone lower on the list. So for the purpose of for awareness and looking at a bigger picture of like its impact on society, I think that list is very valid. But on an individual basis for recovery, a list like that could be dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think it goes back to that, like any situation that anyone's in that they feel like they need to get out of is valid. Yeah. And maybe you, like, if you're out there and you're just struggling, like, you know, with something that seems minor to you, like you might not feel like activated for change and activated to make change, but it absolutely is important. Like there's, I see where you're coming from.
It's so important to have that compassion for everybody at every level with all of their problems.
Yeah. So talk about a little bit, whatever you can share about sort of maybe the psychology or the process behind like some of the tips that maybe, whether it be that's worked for you personally or you've seen with work with people that you've been sponsoring.
Okay.
With, you know, without going into details of like giving anything away for anyone who maybe you've helped, obviously, but like what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, past trauma's a hard one. I don't know why someone can develop something like PTSD and other people don't. You'd think from this experience I have that I would have some type of lasting effect. Doesn't bother me at all. Like I can use I can remember vividly like the sounds in that, and it doesn't trigger any negative emotional response, which surprises me that I didn't have. So from my own personal experience, past trauma can be a tough one, but I know for me, one of the things with like past trauma is it's a person's maybe inability to forgive themselves, to love themselves. Because with a lot of trauma, even if they were 100% the victim, they feel like they did something wrong. There's something deep inside of them that says, no, there was something wrong with me, and that's why this trauma happened to me. And something that I've proposed as an idea, which is easier said than in practice, but is to switch the way you look at the past. And this is something to do with some neuroscience, where instead of associating with the exact memory, which then would activate the emotion part in your brain and make you relive that experience. If you have the emotion a second time, you're reliving it again, and that's what is trauma. But if instead of thinking of the experience, you can think of, what did I learn? What information did I pull from that past experience? You're no longer accessing the memory parts of your brain. You're engaging the problem solving. I don't know the amygdala. I don't know the terms. I haven't dug in to figure that out. But so if you can shift your perspective or your attention on what part of the trauma you're looking at, that could be of help. I mean, I can only speak from my own personal experience.
It's almost like you have to be okay with what you've been through and what you've experienced. Like you have to, like, you can't look at all the damage and all the bad that you've done
or that it caused,
or that it caused, you kind of have to say like, oh, because of that, I've been brought to this place I am, and I could only be in this place I am. There's no other way that I could be in this situation I'm in life now, where I'm helping other people, or I'm been given these opportunities because of this really crappy thing that happened to me, or crappy situation I put myself in.
It's all the negative things that have ever happened in my life that I've done, that I've lived through, that allow me a interesting perspective to appreciate the good things. Now that I know how bad things can get, even the little good things feel that much more valuable because I have a point of reference. I know the change. I know the shift. I know what's up here and I know what's down here, so I can appreciate up here. And that ties in with being grateful. Like, we get so busy in our lives that we forget to be grateful for the food we eat, for the water we drink, the air we're breathing. I know today I was in my life management class and that I finished for drug court, which was little things. And that was one of the things I wrote down, that I'm going to remind myself to be more grateful for every time I consume food, for every time I drink water, every experience I have. So that attitude of gratitude, that being grateful, is a really big next step. And that will eventually, I think, align you with being able to achieve some type of self-love. And a lot of people that I've talked to have said that you start to love yourself from helping other people. And it makes sense. And I don't know how it does, but see, I thought I knew what self-love was. I thought I forgave myself and loved myself, and I started to unconditionally love everyone around me and the universe itself. But the universe, I didn't think loved me, because my higher power was the universe. Natural disasters, balance, didn't seem good or bad. It just seemed equal. It seemed like consistent. And so I thought, how could the universe love me? Like, it neither loves me nor doesn't love me. It just is. And I won't explain how it happened, but I think a key factor was the fact that I started to care about other people and take care of other people, that all of a sudden I felt the universe loved me back. And the way I interpret is, I was putting out a frequency of love, but I wasn't allowing the universe to love me back, so the connection was never made. But all of a sudden, when I allowed the universe to love me, that connection was finally made between us. And I realized I'm not here to unconditionally love myself. I'm here to learn self-love. I'm here to have messy love. I'm here to have goofy love. I'm here to live the human experience, and love is just a piece of that. Am I capable of loving every single part of me? I don't know if anybody is. And if they are, that's beautiful. But I know I'm not. And once I accepted that to love myself doesn't mean have to love everything, but just leave some of me, huge weight lifted off my shoulders. The universe loved me. People loved me. I loved myself. I loved them. I loved the universe. And it was so life-changing, and it really made it easier to feel like there was profound meaning and purpose behind everything I was doing. Because how could what I was doing not be profound and have purpose if everything I was doing was driven by one thing and one thing only, and that was love?
Interesting. So how do people get involved with it? Obviously, I've talked to 2 people whose recovery stories involved court-ordered rehab. Court-ordered, Otter Tail Drug Court has been really, really good for so many people. Not everybody. Hopefully, people who find themselves in this situation don't have to find themselves where they're facing court-ordered rehab before they get help. But what does the process look like for getting involved in a meeting, whether it be in Fergus here, if someone's listening, or in Perham or wherever?
There's a few pieces. First thing is acknowledging that you can't do it by yourself, and you don't have to do it by yourself. You don't have to be alone. And there are people out there that share a common bond with you that will be more than happy to help you recover. So the first thing is identifying that you can't do it by yourself and being brave enough to face your fears and just get yourself to that first meeting. Get yourself to that first support group. Make that first phone call. You go on the internet, there's tons of resources available, but there's that fear that could be tied with things like fear of rejection, fear of abandonment. A lot of people struggle with these issues, fear of being judged. And there is no judgment in these recovery communities. We all want the same thing. We all want to recover and live better lives. So really it starts with just acknowledging that you have a problem and you can't do it by yourself. You need people. You need a spiritual connection. You need something beyond just you, which we call a power greater than ourselves. And once you accept that, it sounds so simple, but you really have to make a decision. So like my decision was to self-sabotage because I was too afraid to go to treatment on my own. I knew I wanted to go to treatment. I knew I had to go to treatment. I knew that it would save me, but I couldn't do it on my own. And so I knew if I self-sabotaged, I would get there. So maybe for someone who's struggling with, say, alcohol, get yourself to a detox. You know you're going to be sick. You're afraid. You don't know what to do. You feel alone. Get yourself to the detox. And the people that work at the detox can help navigate you in the right path to get clean. Doing it simply on your own without like any institution is maybe what you're asking. Get your family support behind you. You can't hide and I'm not going to let anybody know. I'm just going to secretly do these meetings and unfortunately, it's not going to work that way. Like you need the support of your family, and maybe your family is going to shun you and isn't going to like the fact that you're reaching out, which is sad, but that's a true fact. But you got to take that chance. And if that's the people in your family and that's the people surrounding you, you got to find another family that does care, because family doesn't have to be blood. I have tons of families now. I have families at the gym. I have families based in recovery. I have blood families. I have so many people, and they're all my family that want the best for me.
Yeah. Love it, man. Well, I really appreciate it. Do you feel like there's something that we didn't get a chance to get into that you wanted to get into at all today? Not to put you too on the spot, but
no,
I feel like
I like being on the spot.
Yeah, I feel like we did a really good job of walking through your story. I mean, obviously you mentioned it, and I'm super proud of you. Like I can feel that like you've got a really, really good energy about you.
Yeah.
I can feel you've got a really, really good energy about you. And
Thanks,
man. 15 months is like you said, it's like, oh, now I don't have a lot of sober time, but I can tell your heart is there. And there's no doubt in my mind that you've got a lot of really, really good things to share with the world here. So,
and I just want to say too, that just because I identify as 15 months not being a lot of time does not mean that those 15 months haven't been valuable.
Right.
The value doesn't come in the length. The value comes in the value. They're different metrics.
Totally.
And longer sobriety time builds security and helps implement structures, but like it's what you do in that time, not the amount of time you're doing it for.
Yep.
One thing I want to add, because you can hear yourself, I have heard my sniffle and I'm a little sick. So every so often I'd hear myself sniff and I'm like, oh crap, it caught that.
No, it's all good. I
was trying to sniffle to the side.
I've done some podcasts pretty sick before. So, how about, I usually ask people like if it's a best business advice or best industry advice, but this is going to be a little different, a little introspective here.
Okay.
If you could go back and offer, let's say, 12-year-old, 15-year-old Mike Geisinger, advice, offer your 15-year-old self advice, what would it be? Whether it be pertaining to whatever. I mean, you had to go through everything you went through to get to where you are.
I would say something that on the lines of sometimes the worst experiences you ever have in life give you the most valuable lessons. Embrace the failure, because failure is just simply an opportunity to learn.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it very much. I appreciate your time. I don't know if can I put like an email address in the episode description for you if someone wants to reach out to you, if they hear your story, wants to talk to you? I'll do that. Or some type of contact info I'll get in the episode description if you guys want to get a hold of Mike. But really appreciate your time, man. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, man. I appreciate it.
Awesome. And of course, thank you to all the sponsors: Atlas Outdoor Services, Wayne Schuett with Century 21 Atwood, Liberty Business Systems, Fergus Home and Hardware, Victor Lundeen's, Stumbinos, and Outstate Brewing. So have a good week, everybody. Thanks again, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.